This is the Convo Lounge. Expression, exposure, experience.
Welcome to a special edition of the Convo Lounge podcast, where we're talking all things the State of the Nation address that was just given by the President of the Republic of Botswana on the 6th of November, 2023. So we're here to have a conversation, really, or reflections around the relevance of the State of the Nation address to young people and young talent. It's just a light chat. I'd be happy to hear your overall reflections, BK, but I think for me, one major thing to highlight is the fact that this is the fifth, I believe, State of the Nation address by the current president.
Yeah.
And remember, he was sworn into his presidential role in April 2018.
Yeah.
And so we've now got like a longer period to hold the president accountable and his leadership in the country. I think quite a number of things have changed, even in the reporting structure of the State of the Nation address over the past 5 years. So I'll be looking forward to hearing what your thoughts are.
Yeah, fantastic. Rightfully so. I think one thing that really stood out for me with the State of the Nation address for this year is that it's structured in a way in which when you carefully read through it or listen to it, you would see how it's slowly fading into the vision that we have as a country of prosperity for all by 2036, right? Of having a knowledge-based economy. Even when you look at the State of the Nation address for this year, it came at a time when we are at the middle point for the 2-year transitional national plan that is aimed to align the planning of the country's developments to the voting cycle or the election cycle, right? So we are at a point where now we could be looking to say what it is that the current transitional national plan is doing to contribute to the us actually getting to receive that or get us to reach our achievements or our aspirations as a nation. So when you listen to the speech or you read through the speech, you would find that there is, the transformational strategy that the government has put in place. And you look at it and it says to you that, one, there are industries that are being prioritized for us to achieve that high income economy that we so desire. Number two, there are different initiatives that are coming by the government. And these different initiatives that are coming feed onto these identified industries. So I guess as we go on with the conversation today, I'll just try to highlight some of these initiatives and how they are feeding onto the idea that we have as a nation to have that prosperous nation by 2036.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned a really cool point. I think the direct link between the electoral processes as well, the electoral cycle, as well as our national development plans. I think previously what has been happening is that perhaps when a political party gets into office, they're unable to fulfill some of their promises because their plans do not align with the plans of the country that have long been in play and in action. So it becomes a little bit difficult to disrupt the current plans that are ongoing. Yeah. So I think that alignment that is now going to come into play, it brings in a potential for promise amongst young people. If there previously weren't young people that were voting because maybe they've have reduced hope in the fact that does voting actually work. I think there's now increased hope and increased potential for whoever is going to come into power in 2024 to fulfill some of their promises. So I think for me, this will be the third time I'm voting, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that's just something that young talent should probably pay attention to.
And I think it actually should be a call out to...
This will be how many times have you voted?
3 times, I think. First time.
Be 3. If it's
no,
3,
this is going to be the third
me.
time, right? I voted once when I was still living in Mopani and where I currently reside. Just recently.
So it's true. So this will be the third.
So this will be the third time, right?
At least you're a voter.
I'm a responsible citizen, man. Because I think that also just being able to cast your vote, it gives you an opportunity to now be able to hold accountable the people that you've actually put in office to say, these are your plans. If you have NDP 12 and this is your plan for the next 5 years or for the next 10 years, then I can be able to say, where have you delivered on what you actually promised to deliver to us? You know, it doesn't necessarily really mean that we're going to see a reduction of false promises that often come, but at least it gives us an opportunity to have some sort of like direction to say, hey, you said you're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for us once you go into office. Where is it now? If not, then we could try to change the administration into the next cycle.
Absolutely. I think the next thing that stood out for me is this National Planning Commission for the National Development Plan 12.
Yes.
All right. And I think we're expecting about 30 young people to be involved in that, commission. And it would be really great to see how that's going to happen. Is there going to be an inclusive and open, transparent process to involving those 30 young people? And I think the work that we need to do as young talent is to think about, what do these 30 look like?
Yeah.
I think one, definitely they should be young talent that is in the diaspora, that is not in Botswana, to represent in that, such that, our plans are a little bit more outward looking and we can leverage on the intellectual capital that we've built and the social capital that our young Botswana and the diaspora have built. And of course, the second composition in that 30 should be young talent with disabilities. I think, I've had multiple conversations with different young people that are differently abled, and they still feel forgotten in society, that there are certain instances where we don't accommodate them in our planning as a country.
But then also, I think what is most important would be for us to find a way to include these young people in these different structures by including them and actually having their voices heard. Because it's one thing, oftentimes, people say that we have these young people on so that they can just tick boxes, right? Without playing any role, any active role in actually shaping how things go. So it would be a great idea to actually be active in that. And for us to be active in that, it means that we as young people need to be able to educate ourselves, right? We need to be able to go out and say, where is this national transition plan, the document? Do I have it because I am in the media space, or I have access to such information as I continuously do my media work? How does an ordinary Motswana out there, a student, get access to this document so that they could be able to break it down? Maybe perhaps in us getting to communicate our plans and our vision as a country, the National Planning Commission might actually take up that to maybe have a roadshow where they're going to break these different plans down to an ordinary Motswana so that they could actually understand how they can play a part in the development.
Absolutely. And moving away from planning into, I think the hot topic in Botswana is always implementation. That, in fact, people always say that is it Rwandans or Rwandese? I think it's Rwandans. Rwandese came to Botswana to benchmark on our ICT policy, and they went on to implement it, and now they're making far much progress than we are in the country in terms of the ICT space. So implementation is a huge thing in Botswana, and I think it also manifests in different areas of our country, whether it's national projects that do not finish on time, there are cost overruns, and some of them just purely never finish. Or there's infrastructure that we build as a country and we never actually ever utilize it, right? And we had the president talking about this development manager model that is going to now be utilized in government to manage key projects that are involved in terms of infrastructural projects in the country. And I think from a youth point of view, I don't know if this is also going to be applicable from a youth side, but we have a lot of idle youth centers across the country. They're just idle. We've built structures. There's a huge amount of land, but talent is not utilizing those spaces. I mean, even at the Botswana National Youth Council grounds, right? We've got a huge multi-purpose facility, but we don't have young people using that space every single day, whether it's for sports, whether it's for creative arts or workshops or learning. And so the question is, what is it in our implementation model as a country or in our public service that is actually leaving our assets this idle? And I think from the State of the Nation address, I did hear, the president talking about unity, the need for us to be resilient. I think there's a need to focus on activating youth communities across the country. All right, it's something that we've started on Convo Lounge, obviously building a community that are, thinkers towards solving this issue of unemployment, and also building a young community of doers and builders, creatives and thought leaders. We started in Metsi with junior school kids. So I think for me, as I was listening to the SONA, I think there's a need to activate youth communities across the country and to ensure that we reutilize the youth centers that are idle across the country.
But then when you utilize such infrastructure, oftentimes there's always a saying about a mushrooming of incubation hubs, which are just providing a space for young people to be there. But there is actually a need for more than just an office space. There is a need for more than just you providing me with internet. There has to be some sort of support that actually goes towards that. So as we think about utilizing these different youth centers that are across the country, I also know that there are farms that are owned by government, some which are supposed to be reserved for young people, but they're not being used, right? How do we ensure that over and above providing these facilities, we also give them support, be it, linking to networks outside of people who are actually going to help develop them further, development of skills of these young people to be able to utilize optimally those facilities. So that is something that I actually wished we could have looked at how we could, incorporate that into our planning as we go by as the government. I
think the strategy of some of our key institutions in our country need to be relooked at. For instance, you bring about a very important concept that, okay, we've got the assets, we've got the facilities, and also we have the young talent. Now we're going to have more access to internet, looking at that village connectivity project that's currently happening in the country, where Smart Spots, where we're connecting about 500 villages to broadband. The fourth leg is, like you're saying, the trainers and the actual, I don't know if I'll call it trainer of trainers, but incubators and accelerators that come in with a different curriculum and that help talent to build, right? I think organizations like Botswana Digital and Innovation Hub, and also from the parent ministry, need to think about possibly investing in ESOs. ESOs is enterprise support organizations. Convo Lounge could be an example of that, but from a youth point of view, where they now mobilize and go into these different youth centers across the country to actually do what you've said they should do, right? Because by nature, the way that a public sector organization or parastates will operate is very different from how business support organizations will operate in the private sector. So our thinking around funding innovators, businesses, to also funding ESOs within the ecosystem is quite important. I think the last thing that I'll just emphasize now, before we go for a quick break, is that there's a need for young talent to also hold themselves accountable. We need to hold ourselves accountable and take responsibility. I think the president on the State of the Nation address speaks a lot about an internationally competitive workforce, and the question then becomes, is that whose responsibility is that? Like, yes, you have a teacher, you have a mentor, but at the end of the day, it depends on you. And what does, for instance, a Smart Sports initiative on connecting 500 villages mean for you as a young person? It means that you can go to a khotla, you can go to a school library and access internet and get onto the internet and do free courses online, fix your content in the way that you present yourself online such that you can offer virtual services and virtual support. So I think, it goes both ways. There's the work that the government needs to do, and then relook at the strategies, but also there's the work that we need to do as young people to leverage on the opportunity to become globally competitive.
I'm going to give you a task, eh?
Okay.
Just one of the days, take a drive around Gaborone. And just go to where the school is or where the khotla is, for some reason you're gonna find people just standing there. And I got to find out they're actually connected to the internet, right?
Oh,
and
nice.
then I'm like, okay, this is working.
This works.
But what are they doing on the internet?
That's another
question. Let's go for a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue with the Convo Lounge podcast.
This is the Convo Lounge. Expression, exposure, experience.
Welcome back there to the Convo Lounge podcast. Today we're just giving a review of the State of the Nation address that was delivered by His Excellency, the President, Dr. Mokgweetsi Eric Keabetswe Masisi. Just to give our 2 cents on what we think of it and what we wish could have been covered, and how you, somebody who's actually listening to us right now watching this podcast, should pick on some of the initiatives that are there so that we could create an access to opportunities for you and us. Just like we always say, we are trying as Convo Lounge to bring all of these technical terms and big strategies, just to dumb it down a little bit, to get you and ordinary Botswana to be relatable to it and be understanding of it. Just before we went to the break, Yandile, we were talking about how, you know, the government is continuing to connect different villages with internet through the smart boards initiative. And like I mentioned earlier on, this is actually one of the priority sectors that the transformation strategy by the government has, so that we could actually tap on these different digitalization process would actually get us to enable us to tap into different industries. Like for example, on the SONA, there's a statement that there's a patent that has actually come up somewhere around the financial money market, owned by Mr. Tatayane, if I'm not mistaken. And that is, you know, something that could actually be banked on us having that connectivity to the internet. What do we use this internet for? How can we develop solutions that actually get to benefit us as a country? Another thing that we'd actually get to notice that with the different policies that are coming and the laws that are coming, we are attracting foreign investors into the country. How do we play a part in that? Right? You look at mining companies like Botswana and Murupule, they've implemented the CEP program. How do you align to that using, you know, your digitalization of the platforms right now in the country?
I think that's an important conversation about internet in key locations in the country that are hotspots for access to internet. I think we also have free access to internet. I don't know if you've used it. I use it all the time in malls. Riverwalk, Rail Park. I'm not sure about Airport Junction, but literally you can connect to
the Botswana hotspots.
20 to 30 minutes of free internet in those malls every single day. Question is, have you accessed it? Have you utilized it? And if you do utilize it, what do you utilize it for? You know, I can quickly from the top of my head just think about that young person who needs to submit a job application. Why type of you make sure everything is ready, and then you go to a mall and sit there, the public space, and send that CV. You know, the next morning you come back to the mall again, 30 minutes to check, or do I have responses? You're doing a proposal for business. We know that BDIH has got a portal. Now they've changed. They used to open a call for applications in certain periods during the year for business innovations that they can fund. But now it's actually something that goes on perpetually throughout the year.
This is the Innovation Fund.
Yeah, this is the Botswana Innovation Fund. Anytime you feel like you've got the right innovation and it's the right time to apply for funding, you can do that. So that 30 minutes, you do your work being offline with your team and everyone. You go to a mall, you connect, you submit your application. These are practical ways. 30 minutes. What can I do with this 30 minutes? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's online courses. Can you plan and schedule your way? Okay, en route, that 30 minutes, am I going to use it for a short, make progress on my short online course? You know, so there's so many things that could happen with this digital infrastructure that is being created in these hotspots that are there. And I think the next level for us as young people is not just learning from the internet or consuming the content from the internet, but being producers of that content and actually making money off the internet. can you actually get clients? Can you actually get customers? Can you train? You know, how to mo Botswana sentle BK. You know what I mean? People can hear us well, and we shouldn't take that for granted. It's actually a huge thing.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Can you get online and train people how to speak English? I've seen so many opportunities just to train in speaking English. Again, you need to pass a few tests to be onboarded into such opportunities. But the point is, you can literally make money online just from, you know, teaching somebody English. And so that's the next level for us. And I think definitely there's an opportunity there. I think for me, one other thing that has stood out for me on the State of the Nation address, BK, it's in the financial sector.
Yes.
Can I get also the mining sector? President Dubile, as usual, we know that the mining sector as well as the financial services are the bigger contributors to our GDP or economy. And of course, then we've got your tourism and the likes. What does that mean to a young person? Maybe they are part of our communities as Convo Lounge. You're still in junior secondary, you're in secondary, or you are just about to get into tertiary. Career-wise, decision-wise, right? It means that you need to be looking at these two industries in terms of career choices and decision-making. These are the major industries that are adding value. It means that this is where most of the money is. I get it. Employment because these sectors, they've got more business, they are growing. I get it, they're contributing more. And even if you're not part of like the core talent or skills in these sectors, you don't have to be a financial analyst or a chartered accountant. Even in the creative sector, you know, what does it mean for a photographer, a videographer, and a creative agency? It means that you need to start focusing on bigger businesses that are in financial services and mining and see how you position yourself to provide services in these sectors, because those are the sectors that are booming, and even tourism. So I think for me, that's something that also stood out in terms of how do you translate the big State of the Nation address to your own individual decisions as a young person. And I think the last one for me is around the capital markets. We know that last year in 2022, there was the Retirement Funds Act that was updated from the 2014 Act, which was talking about how previously, I think we used to, if I'm not mistaken, have a 30-70 ratio towards our pension fund industries investing in offshore investments. So it would be 70% investment in offshore and 30% in the country and local investment. The revision of this Retirement Funds Act has said that we want to have it at 50-50. But we're not going to do this immediately. This is going to happen gradually, such that the market can also, you know, adapt. And so there were a few targets subject to confirmation on the credibility of these targets, but let's say 38% this year in 2023 by December. And of course, I'm seeing that, you know, gradually in 2024 December, it should have increased with 41% investment of those funds into the country until we arrive at 2027 in a 50-50. What does that mean for us as young talent in the country? This means there is more money in the country.
I see money.
You know, we don't have funding. Even if you randomly did a sample and you spoke to entrepreneurs in the country, startups, what is the issue here? Access to funding. But we've always said that globally, when you look at this conversation, it's actually not a lack of access to funding that is the problem. It's a lack of access to bankable ideas. It's a lack of access to sustainable ideas and scalable ideas. And I think even the pension industry is also facing a challenge now, because they want it back. They need to have that money. You know, there needs to be stability. So these are this is money that can't just be invested anyhow and get into risky business ideas that tomorrow I get it. So there's also that challenge for the pension fund industry to say, okay, where are we gonna invest this money, because the law has now created the conducive environment. So the onus is on the young talent to create and build businesses that can be invested in, to give the retirement funds the return on investment, but also to build and grow the economy. So that's the opportunity at play. And I think another, you know, sector that was highlighted in the State of the Nation address was an emphasis on using technology. So I think for me, if I'm a young person in Botswana, the conversation should be, how can I leverage this connectivity campaign happening in the country of connecting villages to broadband? I go to school. I get funded to go to school. I get allowance, and this allowance, I can also have pocket money to go and entertain myself. How do I divert that fund and invest it on building a minimum viable product on my idea? That minimum viable product in collaboration with professors in my university and my research that has been funded by the country. Botswana Innovation Fund my idea to get to the next stage. What happens? Infrastructure, internet to scale my solution and test the market. In the world of business, there's what we call traction. If an investor comes into play with their money, they want to know
what have you been doing?
What have you been doing? How many customers have you reached? How much revenue have you made? And the digital infrastructure enables young talent in Botswana to have traction on its ideas. All right, and then you can arrive at being able to utilize some of this capital that's going to be based in the country and in the market. And so, to me, I think that's the picture or the opportunity that I'm seeing and the demand that is being placed on young talent.
And when you talk about, collaborations that would come between students and the professors or the lecturers at university levels or at school, there was also a mention on the State of the Nation address that Botswana, the Research and Education Network, has actually now aligned to UbuntuNet. So this would mean that there is a lot of information that would be put out for people to actually piggyback on, or also just to tap into what's happening in outside market in terms of research and how they are increasing their data or the collection of that data. And this is something that oftentimes in our country we say that there isn't much data that is relevant to what is happening now that we need to keep on tapping into. So I think these opportunities are just up to us as young people to say, how do we leverage on such opportunities that are being put out there? Because if you look also at another industry that was mentioned, and also similar to that, is there has been a launch of the agricultural sector. One, over the past year, we've seen a ban on importation of some vegetable produces in the country. That being number one, that is what an opportunity for someone to tap into that, right? In promotion of also the agricultural sector, there has been the revised Temoletlotlo program that has been recently launched, and then it talks,
which is digital.
Yes, right. Which is digital on top of that, right? So that way it says to you that you really need to keep on stepping up and moving on with the times and see how we could leverage on this. And I know with the Temoletlotlo, you could actually go to your parent. A lot of us have our parents, our uncles, grandparents who have idle land that they're not really using, and we are sitting here with that amount of land. Why don't you just go have an agreement with them, have a lease agreement with them, and actually go to NDB and get a facility to help you develop such a land. So these are conversations that I think going into the next year, a lot of young people would actually pick something from it.
Yeah. Let's close it by this. I think the little silent foxes in the room, I think for me, is the silence on diversification. I think going forward, I'd really like to hear Mr. President talking about our progress towards diversifying the economy. We always speak about the initiatives towards this, but we never report on it to say, okay, this year we've moved 10% towards diversifying. We've moved 15% towards diversifying. And these were the drivers, right? I think I want to hear a little bit more on that. The other thing is that I think 6 years ago, the State of the Nation address used to give us an account of all the parastatals.
I was about to mention that.
What did those parastatals do? How much did they earn? Which major projects did they deliver on? The State of the Nation address is now, I think, silent on that. And that's a little bit problematic, because from an accountability point of view, it makes it difficult for us to understand where exactly our key institutions are and how are they performing, if the capital that the taxpayers' money that is going into these institutions are being efficiently used. So I think for me, that would be my closing point.
And also just talking about that, I think right now there's the whole regionalization of parastatals and ministries. Not to give an excuse, maybe that is why it wasn't reported on it, because there's a lot that is happening. And I know majority of the parastatals are even having acting CEOs that are not permanent, right? So maybe let's look at the 2-year transitional national plan, how it goes. Then after that, maybe there would be some certain changes that are going to come from that. But anyway, let's just close it here. This is the Convo Lounge podcast. Let us hear what you have to say on our social media platforms, #Convo Lounge Africa, or just send us a WhatsApp at +267 762 7651 992. Bye.
This is the Convo Lounge. Expression, exposure, experience.